Okay, so there he was. Mark, from accounts. Not someone I'd ever really noticed before. Just another guy in a slightly rumpled suit, always hunched over a spreadsheet. But when he caught my eye in the break room that day, something shifted. He was no Brad Pitt, but there was a spark, something my fated, predictable marriage with John lacked. Rough day, huh? Mark said, flashing a grin that actually sent a little shiver down my spine. Pathetic, right? Me, a grown woman feeling all giggly over a guy at work. You have no idea, I laughed, feeling the words bubble up. It felt good to laugh like that. I realized I hadn't in ages. We talked for way too long, me rattling on about spreadsheets and deadline dramas, and him mostly nodding, listening. At least, he seemed to be listening. His eyes just, well, they saw me. Not like John, who barely glanced up from his phone these days, half watching some sports game or scrolling through nonsense. The next few days were torture. I couldn't stop checking my phone, waiting for a text from Mark. And they came. Funny little jokes, comments about something stupid our boss had done, observations about the weird guy who always ate tuna sandwiches at his desk. It was so innocent, but so thrilling. I started dressing a bit better, putting more effort in. A little bit of makeup. Nothing crazy. Just enough to feel like I wasn't completely invisible. I hadn't felt desirable in a long time. One day, Mark asked if I wanted to grab coffee after work. My heart did a flip-flop, but I played it cool. Coffee sounds good, I said, trying to act like it was no big deal, just colleagues grabbing a caffeine fix. It was a big deal. Sitting across from him in the dimly lit coffee shop, that spark felt like a bonfire. Our knees bumped under the tiny table, and when he reached for the check his fingers brushed mine, on purpose. I knew it. The air crackled with something unspoken. Walking back to my car, it was like I was floating. John would be home already, making one of his frozen dinners, oblivious to the world. Oblivious to me, Mark. He made me feel alive again, even if it was all a dangerous game. A game I wasn't sure how to stop playing. The kiss happened after our third coffee meeting. We were walking back from the shop, and some dumb rom-com scene was playing out on the street, a couple laughing, holding hands. Mark looked at me, then away, and there was this awkward moment. Then he leaned in and kissed me. It was quick, right there on the sidewalk, cars rushing by. A reckless part of me loved it, the danger, the thrill. It was a slap in the face to everything my life with John had become. Predictable, dull, safe. John's kisses were pecks on the cheek, absent-minded. This was fire. Sorry, Mark mumbled, face flushed, probably worried I'd freak out. It's fine, I said, trying to sound calm, but my heart was pounding. It's complicated. He nodded, and I didn't elaborate. Telling him my whole pathetic life story seemed like a bad idea right then. Better to keep it simple, thrilling, a secret. But simple was a lie. Every day I spun a new web of excuses for John. Fake work meetings, errands that ran way too long, even a new girls' night with a friend I hadn't seen in years. He seemed half aware something was up, but also half checked out, lost in his phone and his routine. The more lies I told, the more I compared them. John, oblivious and sloppy in his sweatpants. Mark, always sending me, thinking of you, texts, making me feel seen, wanted. Every late night in some soulless hotel room, every touch and stolen kiss, the chasm between the two men widened. John wasn't just boring, he seemed pathetic. I started flinching at his touch, pulling away whenever he came near. Guilt still gnawed at me. Ugly, persistent guilt. But as the lies piled higher, it faded. There was a recklessness taking over, a dark excitement. Maybe I was one of those women who thrived on chaos, on burning things to the ground. The only thing that mattered was that I wasn't disappearing anymore. I was alive, even if that life was built on a mountain of lies. Mark pushed me further than I ever thought I'd go. It started with little things staying out past midnight, a lipstick stain I only half-heartedly scrubbed off a shirt collar. Then came riskier stuff. An emergency trip to visit my non-existent sick aunt, leaving John alone for an entire weekend. I'd lie in bed next to him, phone buzzing silently under the pillow, Mark's texts setting my skin on fire. Each lie fueled a strange, twisted sense of power. Me, the quiet, predictable wife, now a master of deception. The whole thing was becoming a game, and I was winning. Looking at John, I felt a mix of disgust and a sick kind of pride. How easy it was to play him, to fool him. He was so clueless, so trusting, it was almost laughable. The bolder I got, the more the thrill of the affair consumed me. Mark and I didn't just have secret dates, we had a secret language. A code word was a signal for a rendezvous. A mention of a certain restaurant meant a stolen hour together. I'd leave notes, send cryptic messages, pushing things to the edge just to see how far I could go. You seem distracted, John mumbled over dinner one night, staring blankly at some reheated casserole. Just a long day, I shot back, avoiding his eyes. He just shrugged, barely seeming to care. I almost wished he'd get angry, yell or something. It'd be better than this. Apathy. The daydreams had started too. Leaving John, walking out with only a suitcase, Mark waiting with open arms. We'd build this fantasy life, perfect and untouched by my old reality. There was a recklessness, a desperation. I had to get out. I couldn't keep living this lie, but most of all, I couldn't stand a life with John anymore. Every day with Mark made John seem weaker and more pathetic. One night, after an incredible rendezvous with Mark in some expensive hotel room he'd booked, I came home to John snoring on the couch in front of the TV, takeout containers scattered on the floor. The sight of him, sprawled out and oblivious, filled me with white-hot disgust. This was the man I would have grown old with? A man content with greasy food stains on his sweatpants and mindless reality shows? His touch had become repulsive. My skin crawled whenever he reached out, trying to draw me close on the couch or give me some half-hearted hug. It was a duty, a habit for him, not something fueled by any real desire. I pulled away and made excuses, turning every attempt at intimacy into a cold reminder of how dead our marriage was. My body ached for Mark's touch, the feel of his strong hands on me, the way his eyes burned with that spark I'd forgotten existed. And then, it wasn't just contempt I felt, it was anger. How dare he be so clueless, so checked out as I was plotting our demise? He deserved to find out, to feel some sting of humiliation, to see his little perfect world come crashing down around him. The thought of his face crumpling became fuel for my revenge fantasy. Every time I met Mark, every stolen moment together, the day I'd see John's world crumble felt closer. With Mark, I was no longer just his lover, I was pulling the strings. Demanding more of his time, testing his limits. Can you pick me up here? I'd text at random times, forcing him to change his schedule, bend to my whims. He always complied, eager and excited. Can we get away next weekend? I'd hint, planting the seed of something bigger, bolder. A getaway just for us. I wish. I'd start, before trailing off suggestively, making him ask for details, making him squirm, making him yearn for something more. It was a twisted game, and I was winning. The thrill was in the power, in feeling like I had control. Not just over John, but over Mark as well. He was putty in my hands, and I loved it. But even as I manipulated him, I couldn't help but feel a nagging fear. Was I getting in too deep? Had I become someone I didn't even recognize anymore? John didn't get why I was always in a bad mood lately. What's gotten into you? He'd grumble, and my response was always something sharp and biting. Part of me hoped he'd snap, start a big fight. Then I'd have a reason. A real reason to walk out. But he just shrugged, confused, turning back to whatever sports game was flickering on the TV. The fights became my new hobby. I'd pick at every little thing. Dishes left in the sink too long. The way he chewed too loudly. His stupid obsession with those fantasy football teams. Each argument was fuel, and it started to feel good, in a twisted way. Then, the real planning started. A hidden bank account where I siphoned extra cash from our joint savings. Fake errands that were really me taking longer drives, scoping out apartments, picturing a life without John in it. Each clandestine move was a strike against him, a step closer to freedom. It was my friend Sarah who pushed me to open up. I carefully painted a picture of a cold, boring marriage, leaving out the juicy affair part. Her response was exactly what I craved. "Girl, you deserve better," she declared, righteous anger in her eyes. That did it. Every doubt, every flicker of guilt got steamrolled under Sarah's anger. She became my co-conspirator, my cheerleader for an escape plan I was starting to see as inevitable. Mark had started to whine. "When can we be public?" was now his constant refrain. "Soon, honey, soon," I'd promise, stroking his ego, buying myself time. It was a lie, of course. One of many. But they were rolling off my tongue so easily now I barely noticed. I was numb to the guilt, Too fixated on the finish line, on that day when I could tear our perfect life to shreds and walk away without a backward glance. That was the prize, and nothing, not Mark's impatience, not John's obliviousness, not even the faint stirrings of guilt, was going to stop me. My world just kept getting smaller. Old friends faded away. Too much effort to keep up the charade of the happy, normal wife when I was imploding on the inside. My family, well, their usual calls turned into nagging guilt trips. You never visit. John seems out of sorts. Blah, blah, blah. Each ring of the phone was another thing to ignore, another lie to spin later. It was Mark and only Mark that mattered now. But even his constant presence felt stifling at times. Mark and his dreams of this perfect relationship once I was free. That pressure just reminded me how high the stakes were. The apartment hunt turned into late nights in front of the mirror, practicing my lines. Not dramatic, screaming accusations, but something calm and cold. A clean break. John, I'm not happy. I don't love you anymore. This is over. Each time I said it, the words felt sharper. A knife I was twisting, getting familiar with. One day soon, they wouldn't be practice anymore. And then, the necklace. A stupid, heart-shaped pendant. Mark gave it to me after one of our stolen weekends, whispering how it would look beautiful on me out in the open, once this was all finished. It burned a hole in my pocket, a constant, taunting reminder of everything I was about to do. That's when the carelessness slipped in. Not on purpose, at least, I don't think so. Leaving the necklace on the dresser, half tucked under a pile of makeup, like I didn't care if John found it. Part of me wanted him to, wanted that confrontation, wanted the messiness out in the open where I could finally walk away. Night after night I lay awake, packing bags in my head, imagining myself stepping out that door, no tears, no regrets. Just a clean break, a new life where I didn't have to pretend anymore. But even as the plans swirled, a tiny sliver of doubt started to creep in. What if I'd made a terrible mistake? What was waiting for me on the other side of all this destruction? I'd push the thought down, focus on my anger at John, at his complacency. There was no turning back now. The funny thing was, John finally started trying. I guess he wasn't completely oblivious after all. Flowers at my desk, date nights at that same old restaurant where we always got the same exact meal. It was too little, too late, and it made my skin crawl. One night, he even tried to put his hand on my thigh during dinner. I flinched, almost knocking over my wine glass. His face fell, that confused, hurt look taking over his features. What's wrong? Are you okay? He stammered. I'm fine, I snapped, pulling my chair away from his. Just tired. It was pathetic, watching his desperation build. Each attempt he made to win me back only strengthened my resolve. Weakness, that's what I saw in him now. Made my choice that much easier. Inside, I was a tightly coiled spring, counting down the days. I picked the date, a week from Saturday. Mark knew, was already booking a fancy hotel for our escape weekend. The audacity of it sent a thrill down my spine. I was untouchable. The old me would have quaked with guilt, but now? Now I felt nothing but an icy determination. John, the poor fool, suggested a weekend getaway. A chance to reconnect, he called it. Before, I would have rolled my eyes, come up with some excuse. This time, a twisted smile spread across my face. That sounds amazing, I lied, clinking my glass against his, already savoring the bitter irony of it all. We'd go. It'd be our last trip together, a final act before the big reveal. His last attempt at a happy marriage before I blew our world apart. The thought should have terrified me. But I felt nothing but a cold, thrilling sense of power. He didn't suspect a thing. I was playing the game perfectly. And winning felt damn good. That damn weekend. It was supposed to be the perfect setup for my grand exit, now it felt like torture. Mark's texts were a constant buzz in my pocket, promises of a future free from John, from all of this. Reading them fueled a kind of guilty excitement, but also a nagging dread I couldn't shake. John tried. Bless his pathetic, clueless heart, he really tried. Candlelit dinner overlooking the lake, a long walk where he held my hand, even a damn couple's massage that made me want to scream. But I just felt nothing. His attempts at romance just highlighted how broken we were, how utterly dead this marriage was. And then, it happened. We were getting ready for dinner, me in the bathroom, him rummaging through his suitcase. What's this? His voice was quiet, but sharp. A jolt ran through me. I froze. The necklace. He'd found it. Walking out, I found him staring at it. His face was pale, hands trembling slightly as he held the cheap heart pendant. Sarah gave it to me, I blurted. The first lie that came to mind. Sarah? He echoed, and I saw it in his eyes, the confusion, then the terrible understanding as pieces clicked into place. Who is he? The question hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Every practiced line, every ounce of cold anger I'd readied myself with, it all evaporated. My throat felt tight. John, I started, but what could I say? The lies crumbled around me, pathetic and useless. The silence stretched on, filled with the awful sound of his rapid breathing and my own pounding heart. In that moment, the invincibility I'd felt before shattered. I saw him really see me, not his wife, but a stranger. A liar. And I was no longer the person in control. The lies fell apart like a house of cards. He knew. All my carefully constructed deception useless now. Don't lie to me. His voice cracked. Something between a shout and a sob. Pathetic. A surge of anger fueled me then. Hot and righteous. My turn. Lie? Don't you mean like all those lies you've been living? About being happy, about being in love? You checked out years ago, John. He just stared, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing wordlessly. Then it all spilled out. The simmering resentment finally boiling over. How he'd let himself go, stopped trying, stopped caring. How lonely I'd been, how trapped. He tried to interrupt, I didn't know, but I cut him off. My voice was vicious now, each word a sharpened blade designed to cut deep. My speech, the one practiced in the mirror, twisted into something ugly and raw. He crumbled. Sobs racked his body, big gulping breaths making his shoulders heave. It should have made me feel powerful, triumphant. But something shifted then, a strange twist in my gut. Please, just tell me who he is, John whispered. Begged. He looked so small, so defeated. I almost told him the truth right there. About Mark, about everything. Instead, something cold and hard took over. I tilted my chin up. It doesn't matter who he is. That's not the point. The point is, I don't want this anymore. I don't want you. His pleading turned to rage then. Accusations flew, me being selfish, ungrateful. He brought up my own failures in the marriage. It was an ugly, brutal fight, dredging up years of unspoken bitterness. In a way, it felt like a perverse relief. All the unspoken truths finally laid bare. By the end, we were both hollowed out. Him crumpled on the floor, and me feeling not triumphant, but something close to sick. Had I become this cruel? Had I always been this person, hidden beneath the surface of a quiet, ordinary wife? I shoved down the thought. No room for weakness now. This was just the beginning. After John stopped yelling, something in him just snapped. He got up, and it wasn't pleading anymore. It was rage. I won't lie, I was scared. He never raised his voice, let alone his hands. But now, something was broken inside him. You ungrateful bee, he choked out the word, face red with fury. Before I could react, he lunged for me, but I dodged his clumsy grab. A vase on the side table wasn't so lucky. It shattered on the floor, pieces scattering like our marriage. He screamed, I screamed back. Horrible words I didn't even know I had in me hurled across the room. My mind blurred, hands grabbing anything within reach and packing it into my suitcase. Clothes, toiletries, my jewelry box, it didn't matter. I just needed to get out of there. Let me go, I sobbed, shoving past him. He grabbed my arm, twisting it until I cried out. Fine, leave then. Go be with your whore-loving boyfriend. He spat the words. Then I did something I regret, but also felt good in the moment. I slapped him hard. The shock on his face, it fueled me. I ripped myself away and ran to the door, fumbling with the keys. He just stood there, frozen. Mark. I needed Mark. Breathless, tears and snot streaming down my face, I dialed his number. His voice, excited and eager, made me feel steadier. It's over, I rasped. I'm coming. I barely glanced back as I slammed the front door. John was still standing there, a silhouette in the doorway, looking utterly broken. There was a monstrous satisfaction in that, but also a tiny sting. Was this who I was now? A woman who took pleasure in breaking others? But I didn't have time to think about it. Mark was waiting. The perfect life, the escape, it was all finally happening. I was free. Or so I told myself. Because as the car pulled away, a strange, hollow feeling settled in my stomach. Was I making the biggest mistake of my